Hello and welcome to Sticky from the Inside, the employee engagement podcast that looks at how to build stickier, competition-smashing, consistently successful organisations from the inside out. I'm your host, Andy Goram, and I'm on a mission to help more businesses turn the lights on behind the eyes of their employees, light the fires within them, and create tons more success for everyone. This podcast is for all those who believe that's something worth going after and would like a little help and guidance in achieving that. Each episode, we dive into the topics that can help create what I call stickier businesses. The sort of businesses where people thrive and love to work, and where more customers stay with you and recommend you to others because they love what you do and why you do it. So, if you want to take the tricky out of being sticky, listen on. Okay then, let's start somewhere simple today. There are times when we all get stuck from time to time, even really smart people, maybe even especially really smart people, not because they're incapable of finding answers or solutions to things, but because work, pressure, expectations, and responsibility have a real habit of narrowing how we think. What tends to separate people isn't whether they get stuck, it's what they do next when they do. Some people push harder, grip tighter, and hope effort alone will get them through. Others learn how to pause, reset, and access a more resourceful way of thinking, even when things aren't going to plan. Now, my guest today believes that difference is everything. Mitch Weisburgh is the creator of the mind-shifting method, a neuroscience-grounded approach that helps people move out of reactive, survival mode thinking and into a more resourceful, resilient, and collaborative way of thinking and leading. And he's on a mission. Mitch wants to equip 5 million people with the tools to think clearly under pressure, stay with difficult work without burning out, and work effectively with others, even when those relationships are challenging or triggering. And this isn't about mindset hacks. It's about learning how to access the right part of your brain at the right moment so leadership stops feeling like the white knuckle ride you're on all through the day. In this conversation, I expect we'll explore the invisible ceiling holding many of us back when it comes to thinking, unpack Mitch's mind-shifting methodology, and look at what becomes possible for individuals, teams, and organizations once survival mode is no longer running the show. Mitch, welcome to the show, my friend.
I didn't know we were going to talk about any of that. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, I better mind shift, right?
Don't you dare do that to me, Mitch. Although knowing you as well as I do already in the small time we've been together, I don't think that would matter. I think we'd still have a great time. I think whatever we end up talking
We'd
about,
figure it out, right?
It would be great. Mitch, I'm very, very interested to hear about your methodology today. I know, and certainly the older I get, I think the whole thinking process that I go to is hampered by lots of different things, maybe a bit of cognitive decline, but also confidence and stuff, and other pressures definitely getting in the way. So I'm all ears today to hear about your way of thinking and how we can tap into that. But before I get all excited and start bombarding you with questions on that, do us a favor, Mitch, will you? Just give us a little bit of a better introduction to you and your background and all that good stuff.
You made me sound so good. Now I'm going to mess it up. I know it. Okay. So I think first of all, you look at me. I'm obviously not in my 20s. I'm 72 years old. So I've done a lot of things, and a lot of curves along the way. I would say that my early career, I was involved in instructional design and systems design.
Mm-hmm.
I began teaching and developing a company that taught people how to use computers.
Mm-hmm.
From that, I could see the writing on the wall and made money doing that. And I was like, so what do I want to do in my next life? And I felt, education should be the way that all kids get a chance to live a great life. And we could see, around the world that education was failing kids in so many different ways. they weren't prepared to be adults. And I looked and was like, wow, around 2001 or so, technology could really change education.
Mm.
And so I embarked on working with education publishers, schools, teachers on how do you introduce technology in a way that really helps kids develop as human beings, curriculum, systems, whatever. And I look around like 16 years later, like 2017, and I'm like, you know something? We're not doing any better job than we did 15, 16 years ago.
Mhm.
Kids still aren't prepared to be adults. So like what's going on? How come everybody's how come we're doing the same things we were doing before just with technology? Um why are kids feeling so much stress? Why are teachers feeling so much stress? How come they're not prepared to work? How come they're not prepared to be part of our communities? And I just, I felt, well, something, let me take a step back and see how successful people actually navigate. And so to spur myself on, I volunteered to teach a 2-day workshop of college kids, well, university around the world, but in the US, we call them college kids,
Uh-huh.
but university kids, um, something that I originally called sense making and I now called mind shifting. Let me commit to doing a 2-day workshop on this and then I had 6 months to figure out how I was gonna do that stupid worksheet that I got myself into doing, right? Uh, so so in my fashion, I read books on sales strategy, I read books on economics, which is really a form of decision making, right?
Yeah.
Psychology, neuroscience, cognitive science, military strategy, coaching, all these different disciplines, and it was like, everybody's got their one way of doing it. But if you pull them all together, there seemed to be three different elements. One was how do you really take control over your own mind? How do you look at situations so that even if things don't go right, you still remain resourceful and you're continuing to improve? And how do you deal with people who are basically all idiots except for you, right? Uh, so, how do you interact with other people in order to move forward? So, looking at those three different elements, I put them together into a 2-day workshop. I teach it I taught the workshop twice in a university, 65 kids each time. And at the end of each 2-day workshop, the kids stood up and cheered. And
Nice.
it
What a
was like,
feeling. Yeah.
yeah, it was like, okay, so this is what I was made to do. Um, this is teachable. Most people don't realize that they don't do it. So that's a hurdle is like, how do you get people to realize that they're not being resourceful, resilient, and collaborative?
Mm.
And then, people can learn it. So since 2018 or so, that's what I've transitioned. And it was like, there's so much divisiveness in the world. People have so much anxiety. People have, fears. They're unengaged. But if we could get a critical mass of people to be engaged, to be able to deal with what they previously called failure, to always know how to get back to being resourceful, to be able to work with people even when the people get in the way, they're wrong, they're obstinate, but still be able to move forward with others. Wouldn't that change everybody's demeanor? Wouldn't that lead us all forward? So it was like, okay, that's my mission. How do I do that? And that's what I've been trying to do since like 2018.
Wow. And I'm really looking forward to unpacking it. I can't imagine actually the feeling that you probably got when that first group stood up and cheered at the end of a seminar and you finally feel maybe, hey, I found my calling, I found my purpose. That must have been
Right.
a pretty special moment.
There's an energy that you feel when it's like, oh my gosh, I really hit the mark. And
Mm.
look at these people. They're realizing that they're a lot more powerful than they ever knew before, that they can do more.
Absolutely fabulous. And so look, you've mentioned the three elements of resourcefulness, resilience, and collaboration.
Mhm.
And you've explained a bit where they came from. Why is it that those are the three really key elements? Is it the way that they combine together to get the end result? Are they really very, very separate things? I mean, just help me understand a little bit as to why those three, why now?
So I think any model And a model saying it's resourcefulness, resilience, and collaboration, any model is false.
Yeah.
Any model is an oversimplification or a simplification of real life, because real life isn't like that. But this is a very helpful model so you can focus on a group of skills and concepts, and then you can focus on another group of skills and concepts, and then another one. And then combined, they basically cover virtually everything that we do. Because,
Wow.
everything starts in our brain. Okay. So so understanding how our brains work and how we get stuck, how we get, why we get angry, why we go into fight or flight, and the other things that our survival brain does, that affects everything. And then, so many times we start things and we guard, like, oh, they're wrong because this is the right way to do it, or I did this and it didn't work, so I failed. And so, how do you go into situations so that despite the fact that people disagree with you, that the first thing you do doesn't work, that you're prepared to take that information and move forward? That's another set of skills. But that also affects what's going on in your brain, right?
Yeah.
And then no matter what we do, we became the alpha species on our planet because we work together. And there's so many different aspects about people, human beings being social animals, but they also get in our way. They disagree with us. They argue with us. They try to compete with us. They try to harm us. They get angry with us. Maybe we don't like them. And yet, if we could convert those situations into situations where, despite all of that, we can still move forward and accomplish things together, then that gives us a lot more power. But that has to do with also the way we approach situations. And it also it has to do with how we understand how our brains work. And so all three of those really, you can't separate them. But for the purposes of learning skills, it's convenient to be able to separate them because you can concentrate on discrete skills.
I love that. That's really, really clear. There's a couple of things before I get you to try and unpack this mind shifting method, and then maybe we can take a look at how specifically we can use that in some different scenarios. I'm a massive fan of neuroscience and psychology, not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, big fan. I love understanding more about that. So answer me this with your set of skills and knowledge. Why do you think so many capable, high-performing people still get in this stuck situation, still feel stressed when that happens, and, I don't know, end up being reactive beasts as opposed to reasoned, thoughtful people? What's going on?
The studies have pretty much shown that there's really no correlation between how successful a person is and how educated they are versus how resourceful, resilient, or collaborative they are. It's a different set of skills.
Mhm.
And certainly, if you're resourceful, resilient, and collaborative, it leads to more success. But you can be really, really successful and be, hard driven and opinionated. Look at our politicians around the world, right?
Let's do
Okay.
that. Yeah.
I would not call them particularly resourceful or collaborative. It's like my way or the highway, right?
Mm.
But if you really look at them, like, do they look happy?
Mm.
Do they may have outward signs of success, but do they look like they really feel successful? And I look at them and it's like, no, they're trying to make up for their gaps. And if they could, and I believe, they'd be even more successful if they could be more resourceful, resilient, and collaborative.
Mm.
And you mentioned, the neuroscience. I was in a meeting with a bunch of other people, and this one woman gets up and says, I'd like you to, I'd like to introduce you to Mitch Weisburgh. He knows more about neuroscience than anybody I've ever met. And I'm like, no. No, I am not a neuroscience. So, like, I started with, like, I'm not a neuroscience, and
No.
and yes, I've read a lot of books and I've talked to a lot of people and I've incorporated, but I am not a neuroscience. And it was a good thing I said that, because the first question from somebody said, "Well, I am a neuroscience," and
Wow.
Boom.
Mm.
It's like, so I've tried to build in cognitive science and neuroscience and psychology, into the concepts and the actions that I think that people find very helpful. But I'm not a neuroscientist.
No, and that's absolutely fine. I mean, I think that the topics are just fascinating, and I think when we think about performance, they play such a massive role in how we operate. I
Hmm.
think it's great to get different perspectives on these things. And so let's get into your mind shifting methodology. I mean, this isn't a really tough question.
Hmm. Ah,
What is
I
it
was
then?
hoping for a tough question. Okay, come on,
what,
come
what
on, come on. Give me a tough question.
It's not a tough question because I just want to understand really what it is. At its core, what are we talking about here, Mitch?
Uh, I, I look at the brain as having two parts. Okay, there's survival parts of the brain,
Hmm.
and there's the higher order parts of the brain. And the survival parts of the brain generally are called your limbic system. And that's the part of the brain that first started evolving in the first animals that could move. And the job of that part of the brain is to keep the animal alive, right?
Mm.
A
Yeah,
multi-celled organism or whatever. So it has to be able to decide, is this something that puts me in danger? And then what do I do to to avoid the danger or to overcome the danger? And I need to come to those decisions on very little information really quickly, take action, and focus my entire organism on that.
yeah,
So there's that part of the brain, and I'm going to come back to it, the
sure.
limbic part.
Hmm.
And then there's the higher order or the resourceful parts of the brain, and generally those are in the prefrontal cortex, like right up here. Uh, and those are the parts of the brain that are curious. And I know you've had a number of guests who've talked about the value of curiosity.
Yeah, yeah,
They allow us to do the critical thinking. They allow us to do the innovation. They actually allow us to connect with other people with empathy. That's executive function. All of those are in the higher order parts of the brain, or let's say the prefrontal cortex. Now, the limbic parts of the brain, because they're so focused on survival and they have to react so quickly, they wake up in like 200ths of a second. It's like, boom. Okay. And they're evaluating it. Am I in danger? Am I not in danger? What should I do? And in generally in less than a second, they come up with something that we should do. And the types of things that they come up with, I've broken down into 5 different types of actions. And
hmm,
we're familiar with fight, flight, freeze. Okay. And those are protective mechanisms. And then there's the things that we already know how to do well. So things we're fluent in, our habits. And so I know really well how to drink. And I can be talking to you, hold an idea in my head, and it's just like that's my limbic brain. I don't really have to think about that. Those are the habits or the fluencies. And then the fifth thing is mimicking what others do. Human beings are very social animals. We're not the only social animals, but when we're around people, we're around others, especially others who we feel are like us, we tend to see what they're doing, learn from it, copy it. Okay. And we tend to do the same types of things. So that the limbic parts of the brain are saying, is this, what should I do in this situation? Am I in danger? And it picks up fight, flight, or freeze, which might be something that we have. It's a habit that we have or a fluency we have. It might be something that we picked up because the people around us are doing it, and it locks into that. Once it's locked into that, it says, okay, I've already decided this is what we have to do. If anybody happens to ask, hey, prefrontal cortex, give me the reason why I'm doing this. The decision was already made. It's an emotional reaction to whatever the situation is. And then the prefrontal cortex says, sure, I'll give you a reason. You're doing this because, let's say you've chosen what university you're going to. You're going to this university because you've researched it and it mostly aligns with the types of things that you want to do, and you're going to make great connections. But the decision was made by your limbic brain. That's just the rationale. And
yeah,
by default, that's the way our brains react. And the crux of really well, everything stems from this, but the resourcefulness parts of mind shifting are to realize when a decision is being reached from our limbic brain, which tends to be as a result of the way we feel very often. So, how are we feeling? And then to quiet those parts of the brain to release the stress hormones that they're kind of flooding our brain with, which limit the effectiveness of our prefrontal cortex. And then to tap into our resourcefulness, which allows us to be curious, explore things, empathize with other people, align our actions with our long-term or higher level goals, and to persist in things even when things go bad, and be prepared for things going wrong. So that's really the core, is recognizing when we're limbic mode, taking that pause, and then accessing our prefrontal cortex and being resourceful, curious, playful, in order to be able to really come up with things to do that align better with what we really want.
So, I mean, if I was to try and summarize, which is very, very dangerous for me, because if I have got this wrong, I look like an absolute fool. But it feels like trying to move from a reaction to a calmer, more reasoned response, ultimately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when you do that, there's three types of mechanisms that we have in order to do that, plus a fourth one. But the three mechanisms are sometimes just realizing that you were in limbic mode. Like, I might say something and you might think I agree with this, or you might think I disagree with this. And, you reach a decision. It's like, well, wait a minute. I'm doing that from a limbic standpoint. Let me rethink that.
Mhm.
Just that realization may be enough. The second thing is, sometimes we can just open our minds up with internal talk. So it's like, that would be, you have to really begin with the realization, the self-awareness. Okay. Oh, I'm in limbic mode. Gee, something, what is it that Mitch just said that I could learn from, even though I think it's wrong? Or what is it? How could Mitch be 10% right? It's not like, get out of limbic mode, because, then you're like, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? I'm not in limbic mode. Yeah, just get out of, relax. No, I can't relax. You can't fight it, but you open it up with things like, gee, I know, Mitch is probably wrong, but maybe there's something I could learn from him. What could I learn from him? So it's opening up conversation. And then the third thing that we can do for ourselves is we can change our focus, distract our minds. I know I'm a little bit wound up right now. Instead of like listening to Mitch's words, why don't I just listen to the tone of his voice and just think about, is he loud right now? Is he speaking fast? And so, or, that's one way of doing it. Or let me concentrate on my breath, or let me take a 5-minute break or a 2-minute break. Let me take a walk in nature, listen to some music, exercise. And that gives our bodies a chance to flush out the stress hormones
Mhm.
that were riling us up, and then allows us to then access our prefrontal cortex and say, well, how could I get curious right now? Or how could I get playful? Or how could I empathize? So those are the three things that we can do: the self-awareness, asking or saying things to ourselves that open up our brain, or changing the focus, or meditation, something
So,
like that.
so these are the three principles that I guess, you teach, you educate in the mind shifting method.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
call that the self-commander.
Yeah.
And then a fourth thing is that sometimes we just can't do that for ourselves. Sometimes we're really wound up, and we talk to somebody that we trust. So, if you can talk to a therapist, you could talk to a friend, and it really helps to have a person that you can talk to, or people that you can talk to, who are already familiar with the terminology. So you talk to somebody and say, I'm really wound up. And they might say, well, you think you might be in your limbic mind right now. Um, well, gee, something, let me walk you through a breathing exercise, or let me walk you through an envisioning exercise to help you out of it. Or let me just listen to you. Why don't you just describe and get it out of your system, so that you're able to then be more resourceful. So that's the the fourth thing that we can do is talk to somebody who is good at coaching us.
Yeah. So we're looking at a confidant, a coach, some sort of guide on that in that respect to help us kind of walk through some of those things.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
fabulous. So if that is the mind shifting method, I think in the introduction and looking at your work, I'd like to us to have a little look at 3 scenarios maybe where we can apply the mind shifting method to help people get out of this survival mode that you talk about. In particular, I think things that might really resonate with people listening are getting unstuck. There's plenty of us that must have got to a point where like, well, where do I go now?
Hmm.
And then battling to change your mind, battling
Right.
to change the thought. Then I think there's something where when things get really hard and difficult and testy, how we can stay with that, how the mind shifting thing can kind of keep that, I guess, the resilient part of pushing through and trying to maintain our confidence in going
Hmm.
forwards with something when
Right.
it's tough. And then I think really the thing that will touch everybody is working with triggering people. I guess cooling our jets on the reaction that we can just feel bubbling up inside when we're dealing with some of these people. So,
Right. Yeah.
can we have a look at how you would use the mind shifting methodology in those 3 scenarios, Mitch?
Uh, so there's, just there's two books. Okay. There's three different areas, and two of the books are out. So the first book is on the resourcefulness.
Yeah.
That's, stop your brain from sabotaging your happiness and success. And then the third book is out, which is on working with others. And I haven't yet written the second book. Uh,
Okay.
but the resourcefulness, the reason I'm bringing up the book is that there's 50 different techniques in that
Amazing.
book.
Yeah.
Okay. So, one of the techniques is around visualization.
Mm,
So one technique is to visualize, let's say, sometime in the future. Um, what is it? What is it that you really want, and what is it going to feel like when you get it?
mm,
And so you're thinking, I don't think I can get a PhD. So it's like, well, okay, now what will it be like? Let's just say I got the PhD. What will it be like if I have the PhD? How will people react to me differently? What will I feel like when I get the PhD? How am I going to celebrate?
mm.
Am I going to, who am I going to go out to dinner with? What are we going to order? Uh, when I think about having the PhD, what were the times in getting it that I was stuck and I overcame it anyhow? And how did I overcome it? And the more things we're able to visualize, the more getting that PhD becomes real to us. And that's one of the ways that we can um, unstick ourselves is by imagining that we're successful, and not just imagine, oh yeah, I got my PhD, but really hone down and ask like 12 or 15 questions about what was it like once I got my PhD, and what was it like getting it that led me to this point.
And
So
this all
that's
builds
one.
this all builds confidence and experience for the next thing that comes along, right? You're feeding the brain with more resources, more confidence, more experience, right? By doing
Right.
that and by
Yeah.
doing that the review piece afterwards.
Well, so there we go. Like, sorry, it just, it triggers something as you said that. Okay, is that I mentioned with the limbic brain, and
Mhm,
there's five different things, and five different ways it comes up with things to do, and one of the ways is things that we're fluent in, and you build fluency by practicing something.
mhm, mhm,
So, people say, "Oh, the brain is just like a muscle." Well, it's not just like a muscle, but it does have some things that are similar to muscles. That the more you do something, the more you burn those pathways, and the easier they are to do. So when you visualize, how you did this, you're basically you're burning those pathways as if you were doing it. And so you're building your fluency. And when you've done visualization a few times, then it becomes second nature, like, oh, I'm stuck, so let me visualize again, how I can be successful doing this.
I'm a big fan of the visualization. So I did a very, very powerful visualization, or someone did it on me a long time ago in my very first exec potential kind of program where they
Hmm.
weirdly saw something in me. And the lady who did a group visualization exercise, I still work with today, like years
Oh,
later. The the lovely psychologist, Maggie Evans, if you're listening, Maggie, that picture I still have, right? And it's a very, very powerful piece. I've worked in other organizations with a whole bunch of athletes who talk about the power of visualization a hell of a lot. In fact, on the
They
radio,
really do.
oh my
Yep.
goodness me. One of our most famous athletes from back in my day, a guy called Roger Black, who was a 400-meter runner, recently had some real heart problems and went through open heart surgery. Now, he was on the radio the other day talking about using the visualization techniques he'd used as an athlete
Hmm.
to really pull through his recovery
Hmm.
with, a major, aortic valve replacement operation. And, speaking very candidly about the power of that visualization thing. So I think in the resourcefulness area, visualization alone is hugely
Right.
beneficial, right?
Yeah. It's just, it's not exactly the same, but it's real, I'm just an incident that happened to me is, I was out visiting, my brother-in-law and his family in Colorado in the summer. And his daughter, who was like 13, 12 at the time, said, Uncle Mitch, you always do something with the boys, but you never do anything with me. So I'm like, okay. What do you want to do? I said, I want to go horseback riding. And she was a great horseback rider. So it's like, okay, now I'm not a great, I'm, I can get on a horse,
You can
but
cling on. You'll be fine.
right.
Yeah.
But okay, but which is what I figured. Okay. So we get on these horses and we're going for about 45 minutes and we get to the fence and I'm thinking, oh, now we're going to turn around. And she says, this is where we start.
Ah.
Okay. So she opens, she gets off the horse. Thankfully, I didn't have to get off the horse. She gets off the horse. She opens the fence. We go through the fence. She closes it. And then we get to this gully and it's like, it's dry. Okay. But it's 1.5 meters down, 1.5 meters across, and then 1.5 meters up. And I'm looking at this like, and I'm looking at the bottom. And she says, Mitch, just relax for a minute. Just look at that tree. That's where you want to end up, right at that tree. She says, just look at that tree. And then she goes slap on the butt of my horse. And it just jumped. And she says, and I wasn't ready, but I was looking at the tree and we just jumped and we landed on the other side right next to the tree. And then she goes, she says, if you're looking down on the bottom, that's where you're going to end up. If you're looking across where you want to go, that's where you're going to go. And that's basically what visualization is.
There you go. Love it. Something as simple as that, hey, having a big impact on our brain.
Yep.
I would really like to get your thoughts on the triggering people thing, right? And how
Mhm.
the mind shift method can really help with that. Because I think that's something people can relate to a lot, working with people that don't see the
Right.
world quite the same as I do,
Mhm.
and it causes me some problems.
Mhm.
How do we approach that with your methodology?
I like to start with understanding what happens when people trigger us and we get triggered,
Mhm,
what the brain does.
mhm.
Because we tend to mimic, that's one of the 5 different responses of the limbic system. We mimic other people. And in terms of being with other people, we pick up really their emotional feelings towards us even more than the specific words. So when a person says, you did this wrong, those words aren't necessarily the triggering, but what's the triggering is our feeling they're attacking us.
Mhm.
Okay. And so when a human being detects that another person is attacking them, they will attack back. They'll go to fight, flight, or freeze, and that escalates. And we don't think about that because it happens in these, 2/100ths of a second before the other part of the mind wakes up.
Yeah.
And so those situations where we're triggering and then they're triggered and then that triggers us even more and that whole escalation happens and we don't even think about it. What we try to do in mind shifting is develop the habit of thinking I'm being triggered. And then the habit, I'm not going to let this person control my emotions. I'm going to control my emotions. And what emotion do I want here? And then what do I want to happen out of this conversation? And by developing the techniques of understanding that, okay, I'm going to remain calm and I am centered, eventually their mirror neurons are going to pick up on that. And more times than not, they're going to become centered and calm and resourceful also.
Mm.
And I think that one of the best ways of doing that is to make a game out of it. So you need the self-awareness first. You need to understand I'm getting triggered right now and I'm getting upset, and use that self-commander to calm yourself down. And then to think, you know something, if my goal was just to connect with that other person, can I say 5 things in a row that just connect with that other person and calm them down?
Mhm, mhm.
And if I can, and it doesn't work, like, and they're still not calmed down, it's like, okay, I won that game. I got better at it. I wasn't able to calm them down. Fine, now I can get triggered or whatever. But, as you become better and better at that game, where it's not just 5 things, it's 10 things that you can do or 12 things that you can do, then you're wearing them down. And, also understanding that there comes a time where you can just say, you know something, I'm not getting what I want out of this conversation. Let's stop this conversation. Maybe we'll come back to it, and maybe not. But it's counteracting your own mirror neurons, which are trying to copy what the other person is doing, and then being calm, resourceful, and empathetic to get a connection with that other person, even though probably the next 3 or 4 things they say, without even thinking of it, they would normally trigger you to be angry also.
Yeah. I think this is what's really interesting about the education piece, because if I think about, like recently, the SCARF model, David Rock's SCARF model about how we respond to social threat and reward, the sort of the 5 pieces
Mm.
around status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. I think if you couple that kind of understanding about some of the triggers we might have, and then how somebody is reacting, actually playing your game takes on a different level, because there's a bit here about understanding, well, what triggers are they being hit with that in something that I've said that makes them react like this?
Right.
Or what are my triggers specifically that are now being triggered, and why is that? So it comes back
Yeah.
to your kind of self-talk opening up piece,
Mhm.
is like, well, a little bit of knowledge here about what could be going on actually can help fuel that shift.
Yep. Once you've shifted, then some of the techniques that you can use is to try, I would call it, non-directional conversation. So conversation not about the topic that you're really talking about,
Mhm,
but about a topic that really interests the other person.
mhm,
So first, you've got to get yourself into the resourceful state of mind. But from that, you could, if the person is interested in sports, you could talk about sports. If the person is interested in art, you can ask them questions about art, or some other hobby that they have. They can ask them about their family. And so those tend to de-escalate the situation. So, non-directional conversation. You can come up with ways that you can compliment them. So you're complimenting their strengths. It's like, something you've obviously done a lot of research on this, and I can see that you feel very passionately about that. I think that's wonderful. Now,
mm.
that's not saying that you agree with what they're saying, but that diffuses some of the tension, because they're not expecting you to say anything nice to them. They're expecting you to say, "What are you, some type of an idiot? How'd you come up with that?" Right? You know?
Normal response.
Right,
Normal.
right. Okay. So strengths-based comments are also helpful. And then, open comments about, yeah, I think you need to have the connection with the other person first, but open comments where you're being curious as to what they think is going to happen, what they want to happen, and whether the thing they think that they should be doing, or whether the thing that they did is leading to the things that they really want, and helping them explore their own ambiguity about whatever it is that they're saying. And so that the general technique behind that is something called motivational interviewing, which is something that social workers and psychologists have been using to help people change behavior.
Yeah, I think that's an entirely other topic, a motivation interviewing. That's a fascinating.
Right. We have another 2 hours, right? We can
Yeah.
talk about it.
If only we did, Mitch. If only
Right.
we did. I think,
You've been going since 4 o'clock in the morning. So,
hey,
like,
listen, I cannot complain about it, because what this sort of stuff gets me to do is sit me in front of people like you. It helps me learn new things. It helps me get a sense of affirmation that the things that I believe and hold dear and try and help other people with, I'm not on my own, which is huge.
It's so important to feel part of a group of people, right, who are trying to help the world.
I genuinely believe that. At this point, Mitch, I think it's like 140 something episodes, right?
Wow.
And every single one of those, for me, that conversation has been an absolute pleasure and a gift to just listen to other people's perspectives. And just every single conversation helps you grow a little bit more. And that's not meant as some sort of glossy, glib sort of statement. That's genuine. I wouldn't be doing 140 episodes
Right.
if that wasn't the case of it. What I would really like to get your thoughts on before I regrettably have to sort of wrap our conversation up, and maybe this is the first of several conversations we'll have in the future, Mitch,
Mhm,
is we've looked a lot at the individual,
mhm.
but I'm imagining a place in my head about what it would feel like if a full team was tapping into the same kind of shift.
Well,
What would
that's the
happen with
goal.
that? Yeah.
That's the goal. And so, uh, just in terms of the shift, I'm saying these things, and it sounds like I'm selling the books or whatever,
Hey, that's fine.
but
That's all good. If that
but
helps, that's
around
great.
okay, but around the books, we've developed book study guides so that an organization could bring in the book and have book study guides. So you have a whole group of people who are grounded in those terms. And once you have the people who are supporting each other with those terms, everybody is co-regulating everybody else. And so the whole demeanor, the environment, the culture changes.
Yeah, you're creating an ecosystem then, aren't you, really, where
That
everybody can kind of thrive.
and that's what I'm trying to do.
Brilliant.
Yes.
And I applaud your work, sir, and I'm fully, fully supportive. So please don't ever apologize about pushing literature or books that are going to help people
Mhm,
blast through some of this stuff. That is largely a lot of the point here. What I would love you to do, Mitch, before we say goodbye, is I've come to the bit in the show I call sticky notes, which is an
mhm,
attempt to try and summarize, my goodness me, the tiny things we've scratched the surface of today, but have
mm,
such a huge impact on people,
mhm.
into three little sticky notes of advice, Mitch. So what are you going to leave on your little sticky notes for us today?
I think the first thing is that whenever you are absolutely sure of something, you're sure there's one way of doing something. You're sure this other person is wrong. You're sure there's a right way and a wrong way. That's a sign that you're in your survival mind. It doesn't mean that what you're sure of is wrong, but it means that you're not open to new information. You're not relating it to what you really want necessarily.
Mm.
You're not creative. You're not empathetic. And so it's like just that little piece of your mind that's saying, am I absolutely sure about this? What if, why might I be wrong? And so that would be the first thing is to
Love it.
be aware when you're absolutely sure, hey, you're in limbic mode, you know, uh, open yourself up. The second would be the pause.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, so if I'm in limbic mode, then what could I do to be open up, to open myself up to other possibilities? And then after the pause, when you're working with somebody else, I'd say learn the techniques of motivational interviewing because those techniques are ways of talking to people that allow you to align. It changes from you think this and I think that to hey, here's a problem and you want to do this and I want to do this. How can we solve the problem together? And so motivational interviewing is a way of speaking that allows you to do that. And yes, it's basically two chapters in the book, but you could look up motivational interviewing and you could also, if you're going to have a difficult conversation with somebody, you could go into one of the chatbots like Google Gemini, for example, and you could say, here's the situation I have with this person, and here's how we normally react. Show me how this conversation would take place if we use motivational interviewing.
Nice.
And then it will give you a model and it'll give you other ways of approaching the conversation that you would never have thought of on your own.
Yeah, this is the sort of stuff with AI I'm a massive fan of. All that education piece I think is brilliant and giving us
Yeah.
some guide rails. Mitch, wow. As I said earlier, I'm a huge fan of the
Well, thank you.
neuroscience and the stuff. I love it, and I really love the work you're doing. Some people look at this sort of stuff and go, "Well, yeah, it's obvious." Obvious is such a crappy word to use
It really
because
is.
it it's about practice, right? Common sense is not always common practice. This stuff, I think, the more people can get hold of this, the more agency I think
Yeah,
people have, the more
yeah, can I
confidence
give
they'll
you
be.
what an instance which was really interesting
Yeah,
to me?
please. Yeah,
So this is a woman who, every year or so she gets hospitalized for like 2 or 3 weeks because of her anxiety. And she read the Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success book. She read it like 3 times. And she came back and she wrote to me and she says, "You know what this book has done for me? I now understand what all my therapists have been saying to me. I couldn't understand them before.
brilliant.
Furthermore, this gave me the ways that I can detect when I'm about to have an anxiety attack and a couple things that I could do that have that allowed me to calm myself. And if I can't calm myself, it's early enough that I can talk to the therapist and they can do something so I don't have to be hospitalized." It's, like, and that's the type of thing that to me says, wow, something, and none of this is my stuff. I'm not smarter than the next person. So I just had the luxury of having the time to be able to pull it together, so that, people have it in one place that they can learn from.
Fabulous. As far as I'm concerned, as an example, enough said. Absolutely done. Now then, Mitch, where can people, if they want to check you out, find out a bit more about you, get hold of the books, where can they go, my friend?
Well, people can go to mindshiftingwithmitch.blog, and that's a free newsletter where I'm actually writing about the things in the books, writing about relating mind shifting to everyday situations. So you can sign up for the blog. It's one email a week, and you can look at the past articles also. And then related to that is mindshiftingwithmitch.com, which is the website. And then from the website, you can get links to purchase the books. But and the 2 books are on Amazon.
And the name of the books, let's just clarify the names of the books for
So
people.
one is Mind Shifting: Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success. That was the first book. And the third book, because there is no second book yet. The third book is Mind Shifting: Conflict and Collaboration.
Love it. Mitch, it has been an absolute joy to meet you and listen to you. Thank you for being so generous with what you're sharing, and the very, very best of luck with this quest of getting the 5 million people equipped with this stuff. More
Well,
power
you're
to you, my
helping.
friend.
You're helping. I think we're all on the same mission, right? So,
I would
so
like to
thank
think
you,
so.
Andy. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome, my friend. You take care.
You too.
Okay, everyone. Well, that was Mitch Weisburgh. And if you'd like to find out a little bit more about him or any of the things that we've talked about in today's show, please go ahead and check out the show notes.
So, that concludes today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, found it interesting, and heard something maybe that will help you become a stickier, more successful business from the inside going forwards. If you have, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps. I'm Andy Goram, and you've been listening to the Sticky from the Inside podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening.